Next up is Eric Shepherd, and he's doing a primer on getting started with Sweet16. Thanks, Eric.
So hi, everybody. This is actually more than just a primer on getting started with Sweet16. I'm going to start with kind of the basics of getting it set up, but I'm actually going to also go into some more advanced techniques, things that you can do with it that you might not have thought of. And sorry, I'm still a little hyper after getting to like hang out with the Apple one upstairs, which I know makes me an uber nerd, but there it is. I'll bet half of you feel the same way anyway. Mm-hmm. Yes, that'll totally calm me down. So I've got a number of things I want to talk about, and I should probably get my notes out because that'll help me keep on track. So there's a few things that obviously are parts of the process of getting up and going with Sweet16 and all of that. And the first thing is that you need to actually get it working. And I'm going to actually go ahead and boot to my usual setup here, just so I have something going on. The first thing to know is you have to have a ROM, and unfortunately, for legal reasons, I can't include a ROM, and for reasons of the DMCA talking about not giving people instructions on how to do things. I don't point people to places where you can download them, but I do provide in the user guide instructions on how to do it by hand. Also links to apps that are useful, GS programs and whatever that are useful in grabbing the ROM and getting it over. So that's kind of a bummer. I have actually asked on 3 occasions. I've actually contacted Apple asking for permission to include the ROM. Once through legal channels, actually going to the legal department, and I actually got a reply that it's not on their list of things that they license, so sorry, they can't help me. I did send email to Steve Jobs once and never heard back, and then 2 months ago I sent email to Tim Cook and I haven't heard back, so I don't know. Anyway, I don't expect anything to come of that because that just seems incredibly unlikely, but boy would that be sweet and make life easier for people trying to use this thing. As far as getting a ROM onto your Apple II, there are lots of ways to do that. Or from your GS over, obviously, there are lots of ways to do that. Getting a copy of the ROM is easy to do. My wife actually wrote a program to do that GS ROM grabber, which gets a copy of the ROM and saves it to disk. And then from there, you can use a network connection to get it over if you've got a network set up on your GS, or you can use, you could use like a, what is that program?
ADT?
Yes, ADT to copy the thing over, that kind of thing. I expect most people probably just Google Apple II GS ROM and download the first thing they see. And that probably works, but I didn't tell you that.
I found a bug.
Not right now. What is that?
This is full screen on a Retina MacBook Pro.
This works for me. I'm looking at it full screen. Right now, it's fine.
Can I grab that disk or that pack from you?
Not this one, because this one is personally customized and it's got stuff of mine on it. Okay. But we'll take a look at others here in a few minutes.
Yeah, I have that
after. I like it. So once you've got a ROM, and we're going to assume you've got a ROM now through whichever means you choose. You need to get and install system software. Now there are a few ways to do that. You could actually use a utility like My Image Maker, or I guess it was Brutal Deluxe. They wrote Asimov. You can make a disk image of your real GS and then transfer it over using ADT or a network connection or whatever, and use that. Otherwise, your other option would be to do something like you could actually install from system disk images. Download them from Syndicom or wherever you choose to download them and install from those on a new disk image, or you can use Linux Sweet16 starter kit, and there is actually a helpful menu item right here for downloading the Sweet16 starter kit, and I'll just download it using your web browser, and just copy the image in and you're good to go. Or you can actually go and download the individual disks. Now it turns out I have actually already done that, and I'm going to show you a couple of neat tricks related to initial setup. The first thing is that if you want to start up from a specific disk image rather than whatever your usual setup is, maybe you don't have your usual setup done yet, you can always just double click on 2MG file, an image file, or drag it onto the Sweet16 icon. You boot from that, and that actually creates a new environment. It doesn't mess with your existing normal settings if you're already configured or whatever. Now that I'm here, I can actually, if I want to create my own thing, I can create a new disk image, and we will make a disk copy 6 image. In this case, we'll say 20 megabytes, and just okay. And so now we have this disk image, and now let's say we want to do an install of the system software onto that. We can actually do, we could actually, drag one install disk in and, kind of go through the whole process of swapping images. There's actually a better way, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, using actually something other than the system software. Once you've got your disk image, which you can see it's an empty 20 megabyte, in this case, Protos disk, you can install that. And to do that, you would just simply grab your system disk images that you downloaded a minute ago, and you mount them up just like you normally would, and run the installer on them. And I'll actually show doing something very similar here in just a second. A few things about configuring Sweet16 that can be interesting. In Sweet16's preferences, you have a lot of options. Of course, mine are all my windows are in places for other screens. I'm going to go through a couple of the pages here and talk about some of the interesting settings. I always recommend setting for 8 megabytes of memory on your emulated GS. And it does have this option where it will patch the ROM to allow you to go up to 14 megabytes, but that actually breaks compatibility with a very small number of programs. And so I don't recommend setting that option. I mean, unless you really want to, do weird stuff, I don't suggest it. On a laptop, I like to turn on speed control. What that does is that actually lets you set, the megahertz speed you want to be running at, and it tries to keep it about there. And with other things going on the computer, keeping it exactly there is tricky. But by doing that, you can reduce the processor load on your laptop, which can make your battery life better, reduce heat, that kind of thing, and that is usually nice to do. I usually actually keep mine at 20 megahertz on my laptop if I'm on battery, and I go up to 40 if I'm plugged in. As far as, and then the other panel is where you turn on and off the debugger. And I did want to mention something I forgot yesterday. One of the things that's in here is the Byteworks Orca debugger product. Or all the Orca products, they have a debug capability where they insert special opcodes, cop opcodes into the code generated that the debugger then uses to know where each line of code begins and where each subroutine begins and all of that. And there's actually introductory code in Sweet16 that can trap those and use that information for debugging purposes. Right now, all it does is log them to the console area in the web-based debugger. But at some point, that information will actually be used by the debugger to actually tell you you're on line X of your program, you're in subroutine named, whatever. And that's going to be really useful to have. And at some point, I want to make it so that you can say, here's my source code. It'll actually show you your source code and tell you where you are and all of that. Anyway, my iPad is. So on to the whole EmuPack thing, which I talked about briefly earlier. These are a way to create customized Apple IIgs environments where you've got your Sweet16 preferences, your control panel settings, your ROM, and all of your disk images bundled up together in one Mac OS X bundle, which makes it possible to have a self-contained environment. Now, they're really easy to create. We're actually going to create a couple here. The first one we're going to do is we've just booted from Ewan's Sweet16 starter kit. Well, let's say I want an EmuPack that's just his starter kit. Well, we just go to the setup menu and we save an EmuPack. And we're going to save it in my EmuPacks folder, and we will call it starter kit. Let's save that. And so now we have this starter kit EmuPack here. And we can go and just double click that, and it now boots up, and it is actually configured with just that starter kit image, and we can configure that boot environment however we choose to do it. Now there's a neat trick that you can do with this, and Sweet16 3 just released yesterday actually makes it a lot easier to do this. Okay, here I am in this, and you know what, I'm going to do a little programming. So we can go to Services, open a new Sweet16 instance. Oh, yeah, because we can only have one debug server running at a time. And so now, we got 2 GSs running at the same time. And I've had up to 4 going at once, and as long as they're each from a separate EmuPack, it works great. Now the reason why I only let you do this using EmuPacks is because I don't want you to take the chance of contaminating your disk images by having 2 GSs trying to write to them at the same time. It would be bad. So to help prevent that, you use EmuPacks to do it. Now what's nice about this is that then I can have my my development stuff in an EmuPack. I can have my game stuff in another one, and by using the EmuPacks, if I want to do a backup of my EmuPack before doing something risky, I just create a new EmuPack, and I've got a backup of that whole configuration of Sweet16 that I can roll back to if I need to, and that's really handy for me. One thing that's nice to be able to do, and I alluded to it earlier, is if you want to install software that comes on a bunch of disks, like HyperCard, it's 6 disks. Well, you could drag each one in one at a time, but there's an easier way. You can tell Sweet16 to mount floppy disk images as if they were hard disks by holding down the Option key while mounting them into Sweet16, which I will do right now. Sweet16 is where in here? Sweet16. And now I've got them all mounted at once, and I can just open up the installer. System 6, install it. Good. And now we have on the disk. So we didn't have to do all the disk switching, all of that. So that's really handy. Also convenient when installing the system software, since it comes on 6 disks as well. That's one of the things that was really nice about working on Sweet16 and having worked on it for so long is you get all this feedback, and that was one of the things people suggested a long time ago. Hey, wouldn't that be great? And as soon as that got put in, it was a huge, it just made things so much easier getting set up and going. I think that the fun thing about using Sweet16 is the wide variety of different things you can do with it, and the creative ways you can make use of it. One of the things that's important to keep in mind, I think, is that as a tool for from my perspective as a developer, somebody who likes to write code and hack at code on the Apple II, it's a really nice environment to do that in for me because of the ability to do backups and the ability to have it over here on my screen, and I have the PDFs of all my documentation there, and I can reference all of that stuff at once while I work. And Kelvin is actually going to do a presentation tomorrow about doing GS cross development on the Mac, and that I think is like a natural progression from the stuff, the techniques I've talked about today, because there's some stuff that he's going to talk about that's really going to really going to be interesting. I think the big thing for me is the EmuPacks. I don't think I really came to appreciate them until a lot more recently, because I created them. Somebody requested the feature. It was one of those things like, okay, you know, it's not hard to do, so I'll throw it together. And then I never used it for like 2 years after I created it. And then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, this is incredibly useful. I use it all the time. Being able to have all these different configurations set up to use for different things is incredibly convenient. I think that with a little experimentation, and that's a really great area to experiment in terms of getting yourself configured. And you can find yourself with all these different setups for the different games you do. Or if you've got several different games you like to play, you create a pack for each game you like to play that's configured just the way you want it for that game, whether you want the system to speed slow or fast, whether you want the you know, what discs you need mounted, all of that kind of thing. Even which ROM you want it to be a ROM 1 or a ROM 3 for that particular task. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of room for experimentation, and I hope people have fun doing that. Because I didn't have a lot of time for questions and stuff yesterday, and because I want to make sure that people have time to, you know, do all the things they want to do, I've kind of compressed myself just a little bit here, and what I'm going to do is take questions if anybody has any at all about Sweet16, what it does, how it works, how to use it, anything like that.
A little bit about the EmuPacks. I've been playing around with it, and the changes that you make, like boot up from an EmuPack, the changes that you make to shut down the machine,
they all remain. They should all remain inside the EmuPack. Yes. If they don't, there's a bug.
Well, I might be doing something wrong with this.
Okay, let me know if you are having trouble with that, because that should work.
Because what I started doing, I said, okay, well maybe there's something else I need to do. And I started saving other EmuPacks, like saving them on top, so I would, you know, replace when I was getting, and then I started getting drives every time I started the program for the EmuPack. I'm sure it was something I followed up, but
Yeah. If you get a handle on it, or if you see it, you know, while you're here, something like that.
I was doing it a minute ago, but
Okay,
I
just
apologize.
show it to me sometime, and I want to do that. That's one of the great things about being here, right? I release something, and then people have problems with it, and they come to me, and I can debug it right there, figure out what's going on, and try to fix it right away. So that's cool. Yeah.
You had at least in the last version, you had a place for putting the default disks I want to open every time
Yes.
it starts Sweet16. That's still in the library?
Yes, it is, and there is actually an option in the file menu to open your default disk images folder, so that you can get right to that.
Diving down through the thing to look.
Right, instead of diving down in there, you can just go
Okay.
to the file menu and open disk images folder, and that will take you right to where that stuff goes for your default.
And then secondly, if I'm using an EmuPack, and I had like a hard disk image that I wanted to then use on Virtual 2, I really can't keep that in the EmuPack because it's inside that pack rather than
You
being on the
could,
hard
well,
disk.
you technically you can, because an EmuPack, if you get right down to it, you know, you can go in and show package contents, and all it is it's basically a duplicate of the Sweet16 folder in application support, and so you can actually you know, dive into that and pull stuff out if you want to, or even add stuff to it if you want.
But it's hiding in there. It's not something that when I quit Virtual 2 can just find.
Right, not without diving in there.
Okay.
And that's it's a convenient way to bundle it all up like this. And one thing somebody asked me yesterday about the debugger is if you can change the port that it listens on, and there is no user interface for that. But if you go and you take this settings file in the preferences folder and you edit the text editor, you'll see the entry for it. You can change it. It's just a text file, you know, parameter name equals value, going down the list, and one of them is the port number for the debugger.
I know what's happening.
So,
With the duplicating drives, I'll show you how.
okay. Yeah.
Is the EmuPack
copying some of those preferences over to the library temporarily? Because that's where normal settings would be, right?
No, what it does actually is it actually, in Sweet16, I keep the address of the preferences folder in a variable, and I just change that when you load an EmuPack. It swaps it out for the directory of the EmuPack bundle. And then from then on, it just uses that directory structure for its contents. Yeah.
Does it have any options for converting disks like Virtual 2 does?
No, there are no built-in disk conversion features. It's one of those things that's kind of on the list of things to do if I run out of other things to do.
Work on the other stuff.
The way I see it is there's some really good tools that do like disk image management stuff, and so it's not a priority for me to add that stuff to Sweet16 because I could be doing like doing this debugger thing, which is going to be phenomenal for me because it'll let me do some of the really weird, hacky stuff I've done. I mean, getting the ability to drag and drop files in and out of the emulator, like I did, it's the kind of thing that it gets easier with like debugging capabilities and stuff. So it's being able to do that. There are so many hacks that were done to, system routines and the Finder and all of that, where I patch into it to intersect things. Like when you drag a file, when you go to, let's go to here and let's go to, let's say I take these files here and I go to drag them out. What's happening here is I actually grab into the Finder, I've patched into the Finder where it starts this drag operation, and I've grabbed a copy of all of these rectangles that it uses to present these icons. And as soon as you cross out, I'm taking that list of rectangles and passing it over to Mac code, which then takes over the drag operation from there, so that you can drag this stuff out. And so now that stuff is on my Mac desktop, right? Here it is. And so it's that kind of hacking is a lot easier to do when you have debugging tools, and that's actually why I started working on the debugger. Now, ironically, of course, this stuff was done before I even started on the debugger, but I'm thinking ahead to the next batch of funky patches I do to do weird system integration stuff with the Mac, and how much easier that stuff will be when I can use the debugger to figure out how it all works. So it's a lot of fun to do that stuff, and I get a kick out of seeing how ways I can make my GS do stuff it's not supposed to be able to do. So, yeah.
So you're not so much a purist and you want to reproduce every limitation one might have had on an old machine. You believe in using the power of it's as if you could run the system, meet the specs of the system, running on a current machine, which is basically what you're doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm a very big believer in trying to make the emulator capable of doing like as much of the stuff that a real Apple IIgs can do as possible, while also kind of fiddling with it, trying to make it do new things too. Like, for example, this screen is actually, this video that you're seeing is actually a 16-bit OpenGL texture that's being mapped onto the face of a rectangle. And that texture memory buffer is actually in Apple IIgs memory. It's in banks E2 through E9, and Apple IIgs code can actually go into that and read it and alter it if it wants to. It's there, and that kind of thing. So right here, you're looking at this screen, but Apple IIgs code could actually take this over and present a 640 by 400 16-bit color image here using just 65-bit 16 code. So I don't know that anybody's ever done it, but it's totally possible with the way I've set this up here. And then the dragging and dropping in and out and things like that. But I try to strike a balance, because I know there are purists out there. I'm just not one of them, but I don't want to offend them too much. Just enough. I want to offend them just enough by hacking away at this thing and doing
But
weird
you could
stuff.
transfer a file from this to an actual physical 2GS.
What's that?
You could write a file
Mhm.
in Sweet16
Oh, sure.
and read it into a physical 2GS.
Oh, sure. I mean, all of that stuff is the same. I mean, these are
Yeah.
still ProDOS disk images. I mean, they're standard ProDOS disk images and all of that. And these files that you drag back and forth, they retain all of their file type information and all of that as they go back and forth between the GS and the Mac. So I can
Is that
drag
using,
these
like-
icons over and drag them. Let me give them a place to go here real quick. Drag them.
Are they easily convertible, however, into a Mac format?
That is not something I'm doing, and the reason for that is simply because I don't, it's that Finder crops up sometimes where it doesn't bother to redraw things. And you can see they've retained their type information because they've got the right icons and kind and all of that. So so yeah, these files, they're regular, Apple IIgs format files, and they retain that going back and forth between the GS and the Mac.
If you go into something like AppleWorks and copy a block of text, can you then go to the Mac site and paste it in?
Not with AppleWorks Classic because of, well, actually, this is the
Or any text editor.
You can in any GS text editor that uses standard text scraps. What there is there's actually a, let's see if I can find where I've got each stuck on here. As an example, where are you teach? Here. You could go into your text editor, this type. You can copy that. What you do is you actually go to the Apple menu and send clipboard to Mac. And now we can go into notes here. Ta-da! Yay! So you can do that. Now it turns out that AppleWorks GS does not use a standard text scrap. I don't know what it does. It's very strange. So it doesn't work in AppleWorks GS, unfortunately.
AppleWorks.
And that's something I'll try to figure out eventually, but I didn't even know it didn't work until fairly recently.
AppleWorks 3, 4, or 5 would be okay.
Well, you couldn't copy and paste over. They don't use a standard text scrap either. I mean, they're 8-bit code, not GS code. So that doesn't work. However, one thing you can do is you can actually, if you're in AppleWorks, let me actually name this back to what it is expected to be for AppleWorks. Here, we'll start up AppleWorks. I tell you what, I love being able to use my mouse wheel. We'll start up AppleWorks here. And so we're in AppleWorks. What you can do is in the edit menu, you can capture the text screen. And now that text screen is on my Mac clipboard, right? Now that's not as good as being able to copy and paste, a selection, but it is something. Yeah. So I mean, there is that. The trick is because there's no standard for clipboards on on 8-bit. Now, one thing that would be interesting, and now I'm thinking about it. One thing that could be done is you could do like a timeout plugin on the Mac that called through to the same system patch that I use to do the GS clipboard copy. So with a timeout add-on for AppleWorks, you could totally do it. I don't know anything about writing timeout add-ons, but if anybody does, talk to me and we could totally put something together. It would be really easy, probably, to make one. That's very interesting. Yeah?
That image capture, I take it that you OCR the screen then?
What's that?
The image capture you just showed, you OCRing the screen then, basically knowing what the font is?
Or
No, you just grab memory. You just grab memory
Yeah,
from 400, right?
this is just literally just a capture of that OpenGL buffer, and it just grabs it to the Mac clipboard. Another thing that you can do, which is fun, and I alluded to it yesterday, was that you can go to localhost /6502/currentscreen.ping in your web browser, and you can see your current GS screen. And that's actually what that hack I showed you on my iPad yesterday was doing, where it was grabbing these pings one after the other and showing them to you, and then sending events back to the GS over the network to, you know, control the mouse and the keyboard and all that. Are there any other questions? Anything else anybody would like to see? I think that the important thing is to experiment, right? Because there's, with an emulator and the ease of doing backups and all of that, you can just play and try things, and you're not worrying about, you know, completely hosing your stuff, because between whatever regular backups you do and the ease of making a backup of just your GS environment, you're in good shape. Yeah, well,
From Devin's thing, what was that? It was localhost
/currentscreen, all is one word, .ping. And actually, let me see if I can, one thing, let me find out what my IP address is here real quick. Where is network? I'm not used to the screen being this size, so my fingers are very confused about where to look for things, right? Just for a second. And we have the same IP address I did before. I'm going to try this one more time here. Try this one.
Bad. Bang.
There, that's.
Good.
Let's see, what is that? It's 172. Okay. I'm not connected to the network right now, am I? Are there any other questions I can answer while I fiddle with this thing?
This could be one of several programs running on your Mac, right?
Yes, oh, absolutely. You can
And you
run.
can switch around.
Yeah, you can totally run lots of things at once. And that's actually one of the things I most enjoy about this, is that I can do lots of things at once while I have my GS on the screen, and it's particularly handy, like I said earlier, when I'm writing code, where I can have all my manuals and chat room where I'm getting help from people sometimes, that kind of thing, all going on at once. And that's really useful for me, because these days my desk space is not substantial enough to have all those books open, you know, on my screen. So here I've got, you know, like I showed yesterday briefly, I've got the GS being mirrored onto my iPad in Safari, and I can, you know, it's just sending JSON messages over WebSocket over to the emulator, and I can click. And the keyboard does kind of work. There are certain events I have not completely implemented yet there. So Anyway, so you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do. One thing I'm really hoping people do is check out the debugger protocol, JSON protocol, and kind of come up with fun things like that you can do. 'Cause people can do better than this if they actually put some time into it. But are there any other questions before we start preparing to hand things over to Tony to start in a few
Go
minutes?
online to Spectrum.
Yeah, you could go online to Spectrum with this. Use well, you'd use Telnet. You could use Telnet with it. You can use you know, Spectrum Internet Suite or whatever. The TCP/IP stuff all of course works. I use FTP on it all the time to connect to the other computers on my home network to transfer files or whatever. Which brings me actually to something we have a need for like file sharing, like real file sharing for the GS, modern file sharing that works, and I actually have $400 that I will give to somebody who creates real support for a network file system on the GS. That's preferably like SMB, because that will work with like everything, right? If somebody can do that and do it so that it works well, I've got $400 I can give you. So just throw that out there. So kind of spread the word about that, because hopefully somebody will do it, because that would be really nice to have. And it would obsolete some of this stuff I've done, which I'm fine with.
And if somebody has a solid plan down and needs development tool help with that, back them with that as well.
Fantastic. And of course, I'd be happy to offer what little technical expertise I can to help. But if we can find somebody I'm not a networking guy. That's not really my thing. So finding somebody who can do that work. I could do it, but I can do other things better. So let's find somebody who really could do it well.
Are you thinking as an FST? Or
as an FST would be ideal, yes, because then it would just work with everything, right? And I mean, that documentation is out there now on how to do it. So there's no reason it couldn't be done at this point.
It's a good idea. I got an extra $1. I get $401.
Anybody, you know what we ought to do is set up like our own little Kickstarter campaign, not a real one, but something, you know, on the side where people can
Put up the
contribute
files
to
system
that.
done, Kickstarter.
Yeah, KFest Kickstarter. I'm calling this the S Prize. So anyway, if there are any other questions, or if anybody's curious about any of the techniques or the hacks used to make some of this stuff work, some of them are really interesting, and I'd be happy to talk about them. Or if you've got questions just about the usage of Sweet16, or if you've found bugs, feel free to come to me. And even quirky behavior, because the quirky behavior is bad behavior, right? Software should just work, and it should be comfortable and convenient, and if it's not, then it's not right. You know? So I do the best I can to make stuff that works well for everybody.
Get swamped with support calls and that starts cynicism.
Oh, I've got cynicism already. There's no stopping that. So anyway, yeah, I hope that was interesting enough. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. There's all kinds of stuff going on today that's awesome. So have fun.